Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're getting into a topic that's, well, it's both medically intricate and, frankly, deeply challenging for families. We're talking about Huntington's disease,
Or HD for short.
right, HD. And we've pulled together a really fascinating stack of sources, articles, patient advocacy notes, research, all kind of centered around this one idea, the Huntington's Explanation Challenge. How do you take this progressive, devastating genetic brain disorder, and boil it down? How do you explain it simply enough for anyone to grasp, and why is that simplicity so incredibly important? Now, what's interesting about our sources this time is the context they come from, the whole stack we're looking at. It kicks off by introducing this platform called Mind Expansion Daily.
Right, and they're all about community and reach.
Exactly. They ask their audience to visit mindexpansiondaily.com, and they say, if you find this kind of health insight useful for yourself or maybe for someone you know, they really urge you to like and subscribe, to join their community. And if you feel like you want to support what they're doing, there's a link in the description to buy them a cup of coffee. They also asked people to share their own experiences and their location in the comments just to help that community grow.
And that context, that real focus on maximizing reach and engagement, that's precisely why this topic is so urgent. The source material is basically saying that getting this knowledge out there and getting it out there fast is critical when the stakes are this high.
Absolutely.
I mean, we're talking about a condition that affects, around 30,000 Americans right now, according to the latest HDSA data. But then there's another 200,000 people who are at immediate risk because of their family history.
200,000. That's a staggering number.
It is. So this isn't just about the science. It's really about mobilizing awareness on a massive scale.
Okay, so let's ground ourselves then. For anyone listening who isn't familiar, at its core, what is Huntington's disease?
Simply put, it's a relentless genetic brain disorder. It's progressive, which means it gets worse over time. And what it does is it causes nerve cells in the brain to just break down. It's like it's short-circuiting these crucial pathways.
And that breakdown shows up in some really specific ways.
It does. Our sources point to three main interconnected areas. First, a complete loss of control over your movements. Second, a really profound cognitive decline. And third, severe emotional and behavioral disturbances. It's a disease that, it takes over the entire person.
Okay, so let's get back to that challenge. Explaining all of that complexity simply. The sources set out this goal, right? They described HD as being like a computer slowly losing its wiring, messing up movement, thinking, emotions. So let's see how that analogy actually holds up against the detailed patient data. Did they get the most important things right?
They did. I mean, they captured the most visible and the most common symptoms really well, which for initial awareness is absolutely vital.
So they hit the big ones.
They really did. If you look at the numbers, they synthesize the effects that define the condition for the vast majority of patients.
Right, let's break that list down. But not just the numbers. Let's talk about the impact. What's the number one defining symptom?
The physical hallmark, the one everyone associates with HD, is uncontrolled movements. The technical term is chorea.
Chorea.
Yeah. And this hits a massive 80% of patients. We're talking about involuntary, jerky, almost dance-like motions that just get worse and worse over time. And that's the one that's easiest to see, but it's really far from the whole story.
Right. And if 80% have the movement issues, what about the symptoms you can't see? I'm guessing that's where the whole misdiagnosis crisis really begins.
Oh, absolutely. The part that really surprises people is the cognitive and emotional toll. Cognitive decline, that's trouble with thinking, memory, planning. That affects 70% of patients.
70%, wow.
And right alongside that, you have 60% of patients experiencing significant emotional disturbances. That can be anything from severe mood swings to clinical depression or even sudden explosive anger.
So if you combine the cognitive and emotional burden, that's almost 3/4 of all patients struggling with the invisible side of HD.
Exactly. It completely changes the story from just a physical disorder to a major mental health and cognitive crisis.
And the fourth major one they identified was just being exhausted.
Precisely.
Oh, no.
50% report severe, debilitating fatigue. And it makes sense if you think about it. The uncontrolled movements, the constant mental struggle, it's all metabolically draining. Just walking across a room can wipe you out.
That difficulty in seeing the non-physical symptoms early on, it's perfectly captured by some of the reactions we saw cited in the sources.
It really is. We saw this one X post. It had something like 12,000 likes where a person said, and I'm paraphrasing here, "I thought my dad's shaking and confusion was just stress. Just aging. It took years to realize HD was the answer.
And that says it all. The early signs are so easy to dismiss until it's much, much further along.
Okay.
But this is where it gets a bit more nuanced. Even with that pretty decent simplified explanation that caught the 4 big symptoms, the sources show that it completely missed 2 really crucial effects.
And that's the danger of oversimplifying. It hit the big ones, but it skipped 2 really significant factors. First is weight loss. That affects about 30% of patients, often because the codia makes it incredibly difficult to eat and swallow.
Right.
And the second, and maybe more insidious miss, was behavioral changes. That's seen in 40% of patients. We're talking about things like sudden impulsivity or obsessive-compulsive traits.
So an explanation trying to raise awareness missed symptoms that affect up to 40% of people. That seems like a huge gap if you're trying to help people identify this.
It is a gap, but we also have to give credit for the secondary physical effects that they did include correctly. Difficulty walking affects half of all patients. Speech problems, slurred or slow speech, that's 40%. And the really dangerous one, swallowing issues, impacts about 30%. The overlap of all these things just makes a clear diagnosis a nightmare.
So this complexity, this variability, especially mistaking mood swings for stress or clumsiness for aging, it all leads to the most important question. Why is a clear explanation so vital for the patient? What's the real cost of missing these early signs?
The cost is time, plain and simple. The sources paint a very stark picture here. Misdiagnosis is shockingly common. It happens in 40% of early cases.
40%, yeah.
Those early signs are so often mistaken for Parkinson's or, a severe mental health disorder. And that confusion, that mistake, it delays effective treatment by anywhere from 2 to 5 years.
2 to 5 years. I mean, that's an eternity when you're dealing with something like this.
It truly is. And the consequences of that delay are just devastating. The sources confirm that without any kind of intervention or management, 90% of patients will eventually face severe disability. They lose their independence.
Not in life expectancy.
It's just 15 to 20 years after diagnosis on average, so early detection. It isn't just about getting a name for what's happening, it's about maximizing those critical years of function and quality of life.
So let's zoom out a bit. What here for the healthcare system, for society as a whole? The sources have some pretty clear financial incentives for getting this right.
The data is incredibly compelling. Early diagnosis, which comes from widespread awareness, it actually reduced hospitalizations by 10%. That's according to 2024 data in Health Affairs.
And what does 10% mean in real dollars?
It translates directly to about $150 million saved. When you manage symptoms early, you avoid these incredibly costly crises later on. We also see that active management, with the medication and therapy, it successfully manages the major symptoms in 60% of patients within a year.
60% is a huge success rate for managing symptoms.
Yeah.
But that still leaves 40% who are struggling. What are the severe complications we're trying to avoid with early action?
We're trying to avoid a total cascade of failures beyond the 90% who lose their independence. Untreated swallowing issues lead to a 20% risk of aspiration pneumonia. That's a major cause of death in HD.
And the mental health side.
Just as bad. 40% battle severe, often suicidal, depression and anxiety. And because of the movement problems, another 30% face repeated severe falls and injuries. It's a full body crisis.
We should also mention the risk groups here. It's not the same for everyone.
That's right. While HD hits all demographics, there's something called juvenile HD. It's about 5% of cases, and it progresses much, much faster. It's even more severe. And for those high-risk groups, people with a known family history, the CDC data shows they face outcomes that are about 30% worse.
Which just highlights why we need proactive education and genetic counseling.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's pivot to the root cause. This is a purely genetic condition, which you'd think would make diagnosis straightforward, even if the symptoms are confusing. Let's get into the mechanism.
The mechanism is really a fundamental glitch in the body's blueprints. HD is caused by a mutation in one specific gene, the Huntington gene, or HTT.
And what's the glitch?
The trigger is a section of the gene that just repeats itself too many times. It's a 3-letter chemical repeat CAG. In HD, it repeats 40 or more times. And that stutter, that glitch, basically tells the brain cells to slowly self-destruct.
And the way it's passed down,
yeah,
it's brutally efficient.
It is. The term is autosomal dominant. All that means is you only need to inherit one copy of that faulty gene from one affected parent, and you will get the disease.
So it's a coin flip.
It's a straight 50% chance for every single child. A very, very stark reality for families.
So how do you confirm it? Especially when the symptoms are still subtle before you can see anything on a brain scan.
Genetic testing is the absolute gold standard. It confirms that HTT mutation in 95% of cases. You don't have to wait for symptoms to show up.
What about things like an MRI?
An MRI really only becomes useful later on. It'll show the telltale brain atrophy, the shrinkage, but only in about 80% of advanced cases. The genetic test is the real confirmation.
So once you have that confirmation, what are the treatments? I mean, we can't fix the gene yet, so everything has to be about managing those awful symptoms we talked about.
Exactly. The entire focus is on quality of life and slowing down that symptomatic progression. For the chorea, the involuntary movements, there are medications like tetrabenazine that are pretty effective. They help control it in about 60% of patients.
But it's not just about drugs.
Not at all. Therapies are vital. Physical therapy can improve mobility and balance in about half of all patients.
And what about that emotional toll? The part that's so often missed.
That's arguably the most critical part of the puzzle. Counseling support groups. They are absolutely essential. They help about 40% of patients manage that huge emotional burden, the depression, the anxiety that comes with a terminal diagnosis.
And this is where that human element really comes into focus. We saw that powerful real-life story of Lisa, age 40, in the source material.
Lisa's story is just the perfect encapsulation of this whole misdiagnosis crisis. For years, she had these jerky, awkward movements and severe mood swings.
What did doctors say?
They misdiagnosed her with severe anxiety, a complete focus on the wrong system.
Unbelievable.
It was only when she finally got the correct HD diagnosis that they could start her on the right medication for the chorea and get her into proper psychological therapy. Her symptoms finally stabilized, and her journey, which got 15,000 likes on one X post, it just shows that it takes family advocacy and community support to challenge those first wrong diagnoses.
Her stabilization is really a testament to the power of getting it right, and getting it right early.
So if we connect all this back to the big picture, the data proves that widespread awareness actually works. Those campaigns we talked about, the ones reaching 5 million people, they boosted HD screenings by 15%. That's a huge jump.
And that advocacy, that general awareness, it actually saved money.
A lot of money. It cut the overall misdiagnosis rates by 10%. According to McKinsey, that translates to about $100 million saved just by being more efficient and avoiding unnecessary treatments.
So that initial effort to simplify the explanation of HD, even with its flaws, even missing 2 symptoms, it still covered the core issues for 80% of cases. That awareness created real, tangible change.
It really did. And by raising awareness and driving that earlier action, the Sources Project, we could prevent 20% of severe complications entirely. That leads to an estimated cost saving of $500 million by 2030. Awareness is not some soft goal. It's a measurable public health and financial imperative.
It's so clear that knowledge is power here. I think the key takeaway for you, listening to this, is that understanding the full spectrum of the signs, especially the cognitive and emotional ones that are so easy to mistake for anxiety or just aging, that's the critical first step. It's what will help secure early and effective care for the 30,000 Americans living with HD today. So this deep dive has shown us that public engagement through platforms like the ones in our sources is an incredibly powerful tool. It's not just for emotional support, it's for tangibly cutting costs and speeding up care. So that leaves us with a final thought. Given that social sharing and community advocacy are so effective at improving outcomes for HD patients today, what role does this kind of public grassroots mobilization play in accelerating the actual genetic research and the treatment breakthroughs for complex conditions like Huntington's in the next decade? It's a critical challenge to consider.